All right. So when it comes to the universe, when it comes to matter, when it comes to everything we have in the world today, space, time, and I want to get into this a little bit, we only have a couple choices. Either, and there's no other choices out there. If you know of one, put it in the comments. Either the universe is eternal, and I get it. You got to define the word universe. We're going to do that here in just a second. Either the universe or something that we can call the universe is eternal, that be that space, time, matter, energy, whatever that is. Either it's eternal, it's always existed, or the universe created itself, or someone created the universe. Those are your only choices. There's no other options out there for us to hold on to. Well, take that back. There are people that would say we're just and imagine nothing really exists. We're not really here. Okay, that one I think is pretty easily disproven too, because who's the one saying that we could just be an imagination, that we don't even exist, or that we're in a computer simulation. Okay, well, that computer simulation has to be run in a computer in a real universe. So however you go about, you really come down to these three options. Either the universe is eternal, the universe created itself, or someone created the universe. So to start off, I want to give kind of a philosophical argument using dominoes. My friend Brian Malusian wrote a blog on this, and I thought, dude, that is such a great concept. So we turned it into a little bitty post, and I think that this will be helpful for you. And I want to kind of cover it in two different ways. I'm going to do it both ways, using the universe and dominoes to show that it cannot be eternal. The universe cannot be eternal. Okay. First of all, something must have caused the universe when it began to exist, because nothing comes from nothing. Now, if you watched my conversation with Paul last week, and Paul, are you on here? Paul, I believe, is one of our Creation Today members. He's my atheist friend. And yeah, he's on here. Okay. So if you listen to my conversation with Paul last week, Paul said, hey, Eric, I just want to stop you when I said, hey, I have a hard time believing in some of these very inconsistent things, like something came from nothing and matter came from non-matter and order came from chaos. He said, can I just stop you? Can I just tell you that we don't believe that something came from nothing? And he put it up on his channel and even did a little video. I saw that, Paul. Very, very good. I don't like your ending. I think your ending misconstrues what was being said. I was talking about the whole conversation. But anyway, he put it up on his channel, and I appreciate, and this is not, Paul, this isn't like, I don't want to get into a YouTube back and forth. I'd like to have a conversation about this. And he said, we don't say something comes from nothing, and you need to correct that in your thinking. And I kept going back, and I was like, well, I want to look into this, because I've heard multiple times people say something came from nothing. I mean, Alan Guth in his theory of inflation says everything was from a singularity, and it's not hard to believe that if we believe everything came from the singularity, it's not hard to go further back and say the singularity came from nothing. So what does that actually mean? And I appreciate the commenters on your YouTube. I got to read a couple of them. And by the way, thank you to you guys who were grateful for the dialogue Paul and I had. I really appreciated that conversation. Matter of fact, I texted somebody yesterday, and they confided in me, said, hey, just so you know, and I was working on a project with them, said, just so you know, I don't particularly share your faith. I don't share your belief. And I couldn't help but respond. I said, and he's a friend. I said, man, you've put me in a dilemma, because he's a guy who loves good humor. Do I assume your humor, because he's a funny guy, and can I apply it to our differences right now and say something like this? Bro, you really suck, man. Eye has not seen nor ear heard of the awesome tech that will be in heaven. You're going to miss it. You think the 360 cameras are cool. He talked me into getting a 360 camera for this last shoot I was doing. I said, or do I treat you like a delicate soul with fragile emotions? I'm truly at a crossroads. Help. And he's like, for the former, definitely, appreciate, because I really do enjoy having conversations. So I appreciate that, Paul. Really appreciate the conversation that we had. But I'm still struggling with what you mean when you say nothing versus what other people mean when they say nothing. So went through the comments, and I did a quick Google search. I don't know if you would respect this guy, Paul, or atheist out there, I'm not sure. Ethan Siegel is a science writer. I Didn't find one picture. I found a lot of pictures. He apparently has a really creative personality. So he's got some different looks going on, Ethan Siegel. And as I read his column, he wrote, did the universe come from nothing? He's trying to answer this question. I want to read some of what he wrote, because I think it ties in perfectly with what we mean when we say nothing. Did the universe come from nothing? So I hope this will be helpful as I go through this. He said, if you can consider a matter-antimatter symmetric universe as a universe with nothing, then it's almost guaranteed that the universe generated something from nothing, even though we aren't quite certain exactly how that happened. Now, of course, somebody who's not describing nothing that way would say, wait a minute, that's not nothing. He gets into that. Hang on just a second. To a large fraction of people, a universe where space and time still exist, along with the laws of physics, the fundamental constants, and some non-zero field energy inherent to the fabric of space itself, is very much divorced from the idea of nothingness. And this is where the problem comes in. I'm glad he admits this, and I'm glad he talks about this. And Paul, you can comment if I'm hitting the nail on the head here. We can imagine, after all, a location outside of space, a moment beyond the confines of time, and a set of conditions that have no physical reality to constrain them. And those imaginings, if we define these physical realities as things we need to eliminate to obtain true nothingness, are certainly valid. Kevin says there is a difference between philosophical nothingness and a more physical definition of nothingness. There's 4 scientific definitions of nothing, and they're all valid depending on your context. Definition number 1, he says, it's a time when your thing of interest didn't exist. So if there was a time before my remote existed, the remote was into nothingness. Now, I would still argue that the particles that make this up did exist at some point, but anyway, we'll get into that. Number 2 would be empty physical space. So a space void of anything has nothing in it. Empty space-time in the lowest energy state possible, definition number 3. And definition number 4, whatever you're left with when you take away the entire universe and the laws governing it. So he goes on, I'll let him explain it. He says, we can definitely say we obtained a universe from nothing if we use the first 2 definitions. We cannot if we use the third. And quite unfortunately, we don't know enough to say what happens if we use the fourth. Without a physical theory to describe what happens outside the universe and beyond the realm of physical laws, the concept of true nothingness is physically ill-defined. Well, physically, it means physically nothing, no time, no space. So when I use the word nothing, I'm referring to definition number 4, no space, no time, no matter, and no energy. So I'm wondering if that's where the confusion is coming from when I say some people believe you have to get the universe from nothing. Well, I mean, how did space, time, matter, and energy come into existence? Where did that start from? You only have 2 choices. Either you say space, time, matter, and energy are eternal, or you say space, time, matter, and energy had a beginning. And that's where my dominoes comes in here in just a second, okay? By the way, when you look up the definition of the word universe, they say the universe is everything. It includes all space, all matter, energy that space contains. It even includes time itself. And of course, this includes you. So when I'm using the idea that the universe came into existence from nothing, I'm talking about space, time, matter, and energy. And I'm wondering if that's where the confusion lies. Now, you only have these 3 choices still. Either the universe is eternal, the universe created itself, or someone created the universe. Those are the 3 things. Paul, I'll get to your comment. Let me keep going, and then we'll after we get to the behind the scenes, we'll talk here. So back to my universe and dominoes analogy that Brian Malusian so interestingly laid out. Something, space, time, matter, and energy is what I'm talking about, and people would, the universe, something must have caused the universe when it began to exist, because nothing comes from nothing. And I'm talking about a time before space, time, matter, and energy and all that, okay? What properties must that cause have? Like, in other words, what kind of thing can create what we see today? Well, since we're trying to explain the whole universe, then the cause cannot be time, space, matter, and energy. Because that's the very thing we're trying to explain. That's the very thing we're trying to talk about. So, due to the complexity of the universe, the fundamental laws of fine-tuning, the vast amounts of information in every field and system, especially inside of living things, the cause to get what we have today must be timeless, spaceless, immaterial, amazingly powerful, and highly intelligent. In other words, the universe must have been caused by something or someone, because no one can create something out of nothing. And again, we're talking about nothing as in no space, time, matter, and energy, except something or someone supernatural. You would have to have those qualities. And this sounds very familiar because it sounds like the God of the Bible. And the way he describes himself, he's the only one who claims to be infinitely wise. And he's infinitely wise enough and powerful enough to start the entire universe. So how does this relate to dominoes? I hope you'll find this interesting, okay? Imagine an infinite row of dominoes and start the dominoes falling in infinity past. Is this back for you guys? Yeah, infinity past, okay? Now, pick a domino that you want to fall. Pick any one. And I ask the question, when is that domino going to fall? Well, that domino will fall just after the one before it falls, right? And then when will that one fall? Well, just after the one before it falls. So if you had to claim to have an infinite row of dominoes, how many dominoes have to fall before the one you're looking at falls? Well, it'd have to be an infinite number would have to fall. Well, how long would it take for an infinite number of dominoes to fall? Infinity seconds. So when will your domino fall? It's never going to fall. And it doesn't matter what domino you choose in the line of dominoes. Your domino could never fall if there's no beginning, no start, no first domino, and no person or no someone, no something to push over the first domino. In other words, they can't be infinite in the past. There must be a beginning domino. Well, the universe itself is a vast collection of cause-effect relationships, but all of those causes need a first cause. This is God in his act of creation. God is the first cause, the uncaused cause. Your only other choice is to say that time is eternal, which I'll show you here in just a second is impossible. God is the someone who pushed over the first domino. People say, well, maybe time is eternal, or matter is eternal, or energy is eternal. Okay, now you just realize you're giving it God properties, and that is now your God. So I don't think it'd be fair to call yourself an atheist or an agnostic if you have something that you believe is eternal, because now that is indeed your God. Something eternal that has those qualities, that has those characteristics, that can create this kind of universe would be your God, no matter what you choose to say that that is. And by the way, this also applies to time. Time cannot be eternal. Let's go through the analogy. How can time not be eternal? Well, imagine an infinite row of dominoes falling, and pick the domino that you want to fall. When's it going to fall? It falls just before the one before it falls. When's that one going to fall? Just before, or just after, the one before it falls. So it keeps going in progression, cause and effect. But if there are an infinite number of dominoes, how many dominoes have to fall before the one you're looking at falls? An infinite number. How long is it going to take? Infinity seconds. So when will your domino fall? It's never, ever, ever going to fall. And it doesn't matter which domino you choose. Your domino will never fall because there are infinite dominoes, okay? In order for your domino to fall, there must be a beginning domino. That principle applies to time. If time were eternal, okay, imagine a calendar with an infinite series of days, one after another, for infinity. When are we going to get to today? Well, we'll get to today just after yesterday. Okay, well, when are we going to get to yesterday? Just after the day before that. Okay, well, when are we going to get to that one? Well, just after the day before that. But if there's an infinity number of days, how many days have to pass before we actually get to today? An infinite number. How long is it going to take? Infinity days. So how long until we get to today? It can never happen. And it doesn't matter when you live. Today could never come if there were infinite days. See, there must be a beginning day. The universe exists inside of time. But all of time needs a beginning of time. And that is what God created. In the beginning, God created the first day. He answers this question for us, this dilemma for us, that time cannot be eternal, in the very first verse of the Bible, Genesis 1:1. God is the someone who pushed over that first domino. God created time. And the evening and the morning were the first day. So God is the eternal one. The universe is not eternal and cannot be eternal. So anyway, Paul, maybe you and I can talk about that in the second half and get a little more into that. Let me go through some of these evidences that I really wanted to get to of a young universe and a young earth. Now, there are a multitude of ways to show that the earth is young and that the universe is young and that it's not old. Now, I'm not foolish enough to think that when you give these evidences, everybody who believes in old earth is going to go, oh, I was wrong. Because I got to be honest, I've talked to a lot of people who have heard these evidences and they will figure out a way to go, no, here's what you're misunderstanding, or no, here's what you're seeing wrong. And I do find this dilemma fascinating. It's as if we go to watch a movie and we're sitting in the movie theater and we just watch this show together. And we come out of the movie and we start talking about the movie and whether we liked it or not. And as we describe what happened, we describe totally different things. Like, no. That didn't mean that. That didn't mean that he liked her. That didn't mean that he was an insider. And the other, yes, it does. And we're watching the same thing and we're coming to different conclusions about what we watch. In many ways, a lot of these evidences are the exact same. We're looking at the same evidence. I mean, the evolutionists don't have a secret pile of evidence that are off limits to the creationists. Creationists don't have some secret stash of evidence that are off limits to the secular worldview or to the old earth worldview. We're looking at the same world. So why do we come to drastically different conclusions? And this has to be because of our starting point. What do we believe before we look at the evidence? I don't have time to hash that out. I want to get into these, but that's really what it comes down to. It comes down to our starting point. So of all the ways to show the age of the earth, and there literally are a couple hundreds of ways to show the age of the earth, but about 90% of them actually show that the earth and the universe seem to be young, not old. Now, I think I know why. A lot of people cling to the old earth ones and say, well, because this shows that it's old, it must be old. And I say, no, the young ones, the ones that show that it's young, become the limiting factor on how old the earth actually is. Let's run through a couple of these. There's salt in the oceans. Paul, I saw your video 2 days ago. I watched your video trying to go against the 7-something evidences of a young earth. And I got to be honest, I was really disappointed in the argument against the salt in the oceans, okay? Just for a little bit of history, this method was first proposed by Isaac Newton's colleague, Edmund Halley. This is from Halley's comment. More recently, the geologists and physicists and pioneers of radiation therapy, John Jolly, estimated that the oceans were 80 to 90 million years old at the most, based on the salinity in the oceans. So today, the oceans are at about 3.5, maybe 3.6% salt, okay? Show you that here in just a second. But we have what's called the hydrologic cycle. The water evaporates from the oceans, evaporates from land as well, but evaporates, comes and rains down on the land. And as the water rains down on land and that water flows back out to the ocean basins, it's carrying with it mineral load, salts and things that dissolve in the water, and it carries those minerals out to the ocean. Well, the minerals are not able to evaporate like the water evaporates. The water, the H2O, is able to come out. Those minerals stay behind. It's what makes the Dead Sea so valuable today, because water runs in and no water runs out. It just simply evaporates. So we've got a massive amounts of salt at the Dead Sea now. Well, if the salinity of the oceans today is at 3.5%, and that can only be accounted for in somewhere between 80 and 90 million years, well, how can we say that the Earth system and then the oceans, which formed over the millions of years after Earth's formation, is somewhere in the neighborhood of more than 4 billion years old? There is a drastic difference between 80 and 90 million and 4 billion years. In other words, if the oceans on the surface of the Earth were billions of years old, they should have way more than 3.5% salt in them. The salt in the oceans is incredible evidence that the oceans have not existed for long periods of time. Now, here's the argument that, I forgot his name, but that he said on Paul's YouTube channel. Wait, Paul, this is going to turn into just a back and forth, isn't it? We just need to make this a conversation. But I just happened to watch this video. He said, well, we also know that salt is being leached out of the oceans, and it's true. The problem is the amount being taken out is way smaller, only about a quarter of what is being brought in. So we still have a lot more salt being deposited in the oceans than being used up or being taken out of the oceans. So you still have a problem with an increasing amount of salt into the oceans. So how long could the oceans have been there and be at 3.5% salt? All I'm saying is there's no way the oceans are 4 billion years old because of the hydrologic cycle, washing minerals, washing salts out into the oceans. They cannot be 4 billion years old. Even secular scientists would say less than 100 million years at best. We've got caves that have stalactites and stalagmites in them. These stalactites and these stalagmites are forming, and they're continuing to be created. But the problem is the rate of formation is not consistent with an Earth that is billions of years old. That's the problem. Limestone stalactites, they form very slowly, according to even according to secular researchers, and they say it grows about 10 centimeters every 1,000 years. But we've watched limestone form much, much, much faster than that. So how do we know that these things really only form an inch every 10,000 years, or about an inch every 1,000 years, 10 centimeters every 1,000 years? How do we know that? This is me standing outside the Thermopolis flowstone, or the flowstone out in Thermopolis, Wyoming. This is 100 years old. Now I get it. This is a little bit different than some of the caves that we find, but it is the same principle. Somebody found a spring bubbling up out of the ground. They stuck a pipe in the ground and made the water flow up through the pipe and then over the pipe. Well, this created a flowstone that was covering the pipe, and it was kind of a neat thing. Well, after 100 years, this is how big, actually this is 20 years ago when I was out there, this is how big that one piece of flowstone is in about 100 years. They would go to caves, and in these caves, they would take out the bat manure of the caves as a fertilizer for crops. And they've discovered in a couple places the flowstone, the stalactites, stalagmites grow incredibly fast, not really slow. On the left, you see a bat that had died. It fell down and it literally got encased. I mean, the skull, the feet, the wings, everything was encased inside of flowstone inside of this cave. It did not take 1,000 years for that 1 centimeter or 1 cubic centimeter, 10 cubic centimeters, 1 cubic inch of stalagmite to fall. By the way, if you wonder how to keep them straight, it's stalagmite, might have fallen down, stalactite sticks tight to the ceiling. Anyway, that's how I do it. The Lincoln Memorial was built in 1922. Again, this is a little bit of a special condition because it's not in the ground in a cave, but it had 55-inch long stalactites forming. It was just built in 1922. There was a coal mine that had been shut down, a lead mine, was shut down in Australia. And after 55 years, they opened it up and it was a fully formed cave of stalactites and stalagmites in just 55 years. These don't take millions of years or tens and tens of thousands of years to form. They can actually form really quickly. Earth has a magnetic field that is rapidly decaying, and we know this. Now, we've watched it decay. I believe its half-life, that's what they're saying, the half-life is about 1,611 years. The Earth's magnetic field experiences a half-life. It's half as strong at that point. Well, this is an exponential decay rate. How far back can we go? Now, the secular worldview would say, well, we see magnetic reversals. And I think this is an interesting concept because what actually causes those? We've seen magnetic reversals happen in cooling lava extremely quickly. Like less than 15 years, we've watched magnetic reversals take place. And at Earth's mid-Atlantic ridge, where we see the continents spreading apart, there are magnetic reversals, and it's assumed that those are from, tens or hundreds of thousands of years of Earth's magnetic field going back and forth. But we're watching cooled magma have magnetic reversals within just a few years. So I would say that what we see at the mid-Atlantic ridge is not evidence of millions or hundreds of thousands of years. It's actually evidence of a very young crust. It doesn't have to be very old. Matter of fact, the biblical flood, the Bible puts the flood at about 4,400 years ago. That would fit perfectly with the mid-Atlantic ridge and what we see going on there. Mercury has a magnetic field. This kind of flies in the face of a secular worldview or a old Earth idea that Mercury is very old. Mercury still has a hot molten core, a solid inner core, but then a hot molten outer core. And this gives it a magnetic field. The problem is Mercury is a pretty small planet. And with the temperature of space and what's going on, Mercury is cooling off. Well, you can't claim that Mercury is somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 4.5 billion years old and it still be a hot planet. It would have cooled off a long time ago. So the fact that Mercury still has a strong magnetic field and has a molten outer core would be great evidence that Mercury is not billions of years old. Uranus and Neptune have magnetic fields as well. Matter of fact, all the planets indicate that they are young, they are not old. So the outer planets, Uranus and Neptune, have magnetic fields, but they also should be long dead if they're as old as the evolutionary beliefs claim that they are. If you look up how old is Neptune, they'll say it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 4.6 billion years old would be the age. My problem is this is impossible when they still have a hot molten core. They should be cold by now. They should not have that hot molten core out there in space over 4.5 billion years. Jupiter has moons that go around it, and the moons have magnetic fields. A guy named Russell Humphreys actually did a lot of work on this, and he correctly predicted the gravitational fields of several planets before we ever got out there and actually measured them. And he measured them based on a young Earth worldview. In other words, used the 6,000 year idea for the age of the Earth to measure the strength of these magnetic fields. And when they got out there and actually measured them, his predictions were correct. If it had been predicted based on old Earth calculations, his predictions would have been way off because they would have been much weaker, would have been much less of a magnetic field than what was predicted based on a 6,000-year-old Earth. Saturn is actually losing its rings. They say it would take somewhere around 300 million years for Saturn's rings to completely dissipate, to completely go away. Well, this is a problem. And I know they have a rescuing advice. They say, well, no. Saturn's rings just formed somewhere between 10 and 100 million years ago. Well, that's quite convenient, but there's no explanation for this. There's no explanation of what formed Saturn's rings 10 to 100 million years ago. You're still extrapolating out into the past, something that you don't see. Oh, we know it only lasts this long. They're there, so they must have just formed less than that time ago. It's a rescuing device. It's not really dealing even with a uniformitarian process that they would claim to hold to. Saturn's moon looks really young. It still has geysers and hot water being spewed out at supersonic speeds, indicating a very young moon. There's still volcanic activity on Jupiter's moons. indicating that they are young, not old. We've got comets that come through our solar system. We mentioned Halley, who was talking about the salinity in the oceans. Halley's comet is a short period comet. When they study comets, they know that as it comes by the solar radiation from the sun, the tail of the comet is actually debris being blown off the comet. So as it goes around the sun, debris is being blown off. It's losing material. Well, you can't keep losing material until eventually all the material's gone. So when they study these comets out and they look at them and they observe the size of them, they go, you know what? It doesn't look like these comets can last for more than 20,000 years. Like they can't keep coming around the sun and getting debris being blown off at the rate that they're doing it and only be be more than 20,000 years old. This is impossible. But we still have comets in our solar system. And they've got a rescuing device. I'll tell you about that. Another thing is long period comets. We have these comets that only come through that aren't just every 70 years. I think Halley's is every 72 years. It's greater than a 200-year period that these comets come through. Well, they're still doing that. And again, we can't make sense of these in an old Earth system where these have always happened. So what's the rescuing device? Oh, there is something out there that is sending comets down here to the Earth. And as it sends comets to the Earth, to our solar system and come through our solar system, and as those comets come through, they lose material, but there's an originator. There's something out there. So a guy named Jan Oort invented what's called the Oort cloud. And he said, maybe there is a spherical shell of comets out there. And that's what's sending these comets in through our solar system. And this, Paul, I want to talk to you about this one too. I struggle going, why do we really accept this excuse? And I'm calling it an excuse, not to be diminishing, but to say, I think this is an excuse of an Oort cloud. If you see the graph here, check this out. The sun and the earth is 1 astronomical unit away. So, and they tell you these objects are not to scale. Not only are the objects not to scale, the timeline is not to scale. So you got the sun, there's Earth, Mars, then you got the main asteroid belt where the main asteroid belt would be, then the inner Oort cloud is out there, then the Oort cloud, where the Oort cloud is. Now, I need you to notice something. The sun and the earth distance is 1 astronomical unit, 1 AU. The sun to the earth is 1. When you get out to Pluto, Pluto is 39 astronomical units away. So you can see what he's doing is he's taking these numbers 1, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. He's actually extrapolating extreme time in order to get it on the graph down to a very short amount of time. Or on a graph, very short. So where you see Pluto, that would actually be the distance from the sun and the earth that you see there. That would actually be 39 of those away. That's how far away Pluto is. So to get it to scale, Pluto would be 39 of those away. The Oort cloud is said to be 50,000 astronomical units away. So you'd have to have a really big chart in order to put it on here. You take the distance from the sun and the earth right there, and then you do that 50,000 times. That's how far away they claim this Oort cloud is. It doesn't fit with what we've never seen it. We can't test this. We've made a hypothesis. Maybe something is out there. It's not a scientific one. It's not something that's tested and demonstrated. It's not inside the realms of science, if you will. It's a rescuing device. It's a way to say, well, there's got to be we see them, there's got to be some explanation. And I think that's kind of the big deal. And I'm curious how we reconcile these things. We're looking at the same information, we're coming to different conclusions. I look at Niagara Falls, and even secular reports in Niagara Falls would say it's been eroding for 12,300 years. Well, why hasn't Niagara Falls eroded further than that? Why is it at 12,300 years? It seems to me if the earth as we know it today, or North America, especially that area up there by Canada, and the United States, has been there for more than 12,000 years in a stable setting, which they would say it has, Niagara Falls should have eroded way farther than that. Niagara Falls is evidence, I would say, of a young earth. It's eroding at about 1 foot per year, depending on water flows. Some people say up to 10 feet, depending on how hard that layer is that it's cutting through right there. But that's a whole nother problem, erosion rates today. they've measured how long it would take to erode all the continents. Like to get North America to erode down to nothing, where North America is now at sea level. They say that would take about 10 million years. And this is with water, this is with rain, this is with, basic erosion. This isn't the massive events. This is under not taking those into account, because those are kind of small. The catastrophic things that we see are small compared to the normal erosion that's taking place. Well, if America and North America should be gone in 10 million years, how would we have rock that is still above sea level in North America, supposedly more than 10 million years old? It should have been eroded down to nothing by now. How can we have fossils inside those rocks that are supposedly way more than 10 million years old, still above sea level? How can we find dinosaur bones? I mean, when I was in Montana, I got to go look at dinosaur bones right there in the dirt. These dinosaur bones have some of them are fossilized, some of them are not fossilized. Some of them are partly fossilized, some of them are partly not fossilized, like in the same bone. If erosion would have taken these things off the continents in 10 million years, how do we still have fossil dinosaur bones, supposedly 65 million years old, still above sea level? It just doesn't make sense. We find radioactive carbon-14. Carbon-14 is found inside of diamonds. Now, the carbon-14 that we see cannot last for more than 100,000 years. Like, that's maximum. You don't get carbon-14 to last more than 100,000 years. So why would we still see carbon-14 in diamonds? I mean, these are the hardest substance known to man. So you can't push carbon-14 into the diamonds and, we threw some in, we soaked it in a bath of carbon-14, and that's why they're made out of carbon. Some of it's radioactive carbon. If we find any radioactive carbon in diamonds, that means they're less than 100,000 years old. And we find significant amount of carbon-14 in diamonds. They can't be more than 100,000 years old. And according to the secular, I keep calling it secular, according to an old earth interpretation, diamonds probably formed somewhere around 200 to 300 million years ago. So we've got a big problem. We got rock arches in North America, and these are actually around the world. If you look at the rock arches, though, they're eroding away. They're constantly crumbling down. 43 rock arches have fallen since 1970. There's about 2,000 of these. Well, how come we still have these arches around? If this erosional event that took these out occurred hundreds of thousands or millions of years ago to create this erosion, we shouldn't see these arches, these fragile arches that we still have today. So arches are great evidence that the earth, North America here, is not millions of years old. There's also a lack of bioturbidation. This is the tilling of the ground. Insects, worms, they burrow down into the ground and they actually stir up the soil. So they actually make it where if you had level or layered soil, they actually are constantly tilling that soil up and making it where those layers are now kind of mixed together. Insects do this all the time. Well, you would expect to see lots of this mixing as insects lived throughout the world while these layers are being formed, because you got this layer supposedly, 300 million years old, this one 295 million years old, this one 290 million years old. Over millions of years, you'd expect to see this bioturbidation. But we don't see that. What we see is nice, neat layers. It's as if these were laid down very quickly by water all around the world. The biblical flood makes sense of the science, of the geology that we see today. We've got things like the Great Unconformity. I got to go to this spot right here with Dr. John and actually a whole group of guys. It was pretty cool, where you actually get to see where creation rock, the granites and the schists, meet the judgment rock. All of a sudden, now it's layered. This is where creation and the flood meet. The foundations of the earth meet the flood layers. This layer is called the Great Unconformity because right in between those two rock layers that you see us standing next to. So you see the layers that are not stratified, that's the granites, and then the ones that are stratified right above it. We're missing somewhere around 500 million to 1 billion years in geologic time that's been either eroded away or however you want to say it's gone There's rock layers there that are completely missing. This makes sense with a global flood. It doesn't make sense. And this layer, by the way, is found around the world. I was just in the Wisconsin Dells. I did a movie on that. You can watch that, Operation Wisconsin Dells. It doesn't make sense in an old Earth worldview. It does make sense in a flood model, in a catastrophic model. So I built a website called searchcreation.org. And I love this website because if you go there and you just do a search, age of the earth, and you search for the age of the earth, you're going to come up with dozens and dozens of articles going through the science of the age of the earth, showing the earth cannot be millions or billions of years old. It does indeed have to be young. So is the earth young? Is there evidence for a young earth? There's an overwhelming amount of evidence for a young earth. There's no doubt about it. I'm constantly frustrated, if you will, that we are now presenting evidence that the earth is old, but we're doing that from a worldview that started that concept without any scientific evidence. It was born out of a frustration with the Bible and an attempt to get rid of the Bible. We developed old earth ideas. Because if you take out Genesis, Genesis is the foundational book of all the Bible. And if you study the Bible, you'll see that. And I think even atheists would agree that Genesis is the foundation. You get every major doctrine from Genesis. You get the doctrine of marriage. You get the idea of wearing clothes. You get the doctrine of death, sin and death and punishment from Genesis. You get the idea of Christ returning to atone for man's sin in Genesis. So the gospel is based in Genesis. So if it's really all based in Genesis, if that's the foundation, it's no wonder that the attack came in the form of an old earth, and that came against Genesis. Now, sorry about the technical troubles. YouTube and Facebook, I'm going to kick you off unless Amanda already did. Sorry, I'm going to kick you guys off now. To my Creation Today partners, I want you guys to chime in on this conversation and let me know what you guys think. So if you'd like to talk, I think I'll be able to hear you. Just simply raise your hand and let's have a conversation. Amanda, if you didn't already kick them off, Facebook, YouTube, thank you. I'll see you guys next week for a great show. If you want to talk, raise your hand if you got a question, and I'll try to jump back through the comments here. And I'm sorry I missed a lot of these while I was monologuing.